Hi everyone, today we'll be doing a quick review of Unit 3.14, how to use observation, assessment, and planning to help with children's development. So let's talk a little bit about why observations are important. It's very important that you use observation to help you plan for the individual children's need. You might also want to use observations to find out if there's any risk for special education needs, for early intervention. You might want to do developmental screenings to help you to know when you need to intervene and work with other specialists. You might have made some changes in the environment. There may be you have a new learning center or a corner. You might want to see how children are playing with some new toys that you brought in. Maybe also they're transitioning, so maybe you want to use observations to help you support children and help them from transition from activity to activity, from classroom to classroom. It also helps you to work in partnership. So when you're working in partnership either with parents, you're discussing the needs of children, you really need to observe that children so that you can get to know and get familiar, and then you have things to share with either with parents or with other colleagues. There's lots of benefits for doing observations like we discussed. It helps you mainly, you really can't plan without doing observations. So we tell teachers all the time, when you're sitting in isolation, trying to come up with a weekly plan of activities that you're going to do. So let's say you decide, on Sunday I'm going to do water activity, on Monday I'm going to do this or painting activity or this or that. That's great, but really the power of planning is when it is specific to the needs of the children. So sometimes you'll start off with having some guidelines about what activities you want to do as. So next, you want to think about, you want to be factual when you're doing observations and assessment, right? So what do you think about when you look at this picture? The facts is that the child is standing with her face to the wall and her hands are over her eyes, right? That's the facts. But your opinions may be that she's crying or hiding or sulking, etc. So you want to be very careful that you're objective when you are observing children, and you don't add in your own thoughts or feelings, because observations need to be authentic and they need to be based on facts. Also, you want to remember that when you are observing children, confidentiality is very, very important. So the notes that you make about children, where do you save them? Where do you place them? Are only people who are allowed to see those notes seeing them? Are they shared with the adults that are that need to see them? You need to think about that as well. And next, we want to talk about that there's so many different types of observation methods. There are so many different techniques, and there are strengths and weaknesses for each technique. And you need to, as a practitioner, be familiar with all of these techniques, because you need to be able to know which technique is best. So for the different type of observation or different goal of the observation that you want to do. And so let's see a couple over here. You have an event sample. An event sample is when you are recording an event over a long period of time. So for example, let's say if a child is having a challenging behavior like biting, right? You might want to keep an event sample or keeping a record of those biting habits and how that occurs over a period of time. A time sample is a different kind of method. A time sample is when the child is observed over a long period of time at different intervals. So let's say every 10 minutes, you observe the child for 2 minutes and you write down whatever that child is doing for those 2 minutes, right? And maybe you want to that, and then you repeat that every 10 minutes. It's like on a timer. And then you may want to use time sample when you're trying to see what kind of social skills the child has. Could be one reason why you use time sample. A target child observation type is that when you focus on one particular child over a period of time. So the emphasis is on all of the activities that the child participates in, all of the social interaction that the child has, and all of the different types of communication that the child is doing. So you really want to focus on that target child. Here you can see an example. Here's an example of the event sample. So that was the first type that we talked about. And in this instance, the teacher is keeping a record, of different types of behaviors. So she's looking at the different settings. So during free time area, during recess area, during science time, during lunchtime. And then she's recording the date and the total number of times a certain behavior is occurring. So she noticed that in the free time, which was about 20 minutes on that particular day, she noticed that the child was biting the hand, a total of almost 113 times. Wow, that's a lot, right? So that would be one example of how to use the event sampling. Another one would be a narrative and free description. This is the one usually that most students start with. So this is just a free written record where you just kind of relax, watch what the child is doing, and just write down everything that's happening for that period of time. And we also recommend that too, if you're not that familiar with other types of observations yet, that you can start with this one is a simpler one, and then start to move on to other types of observation methods. There's lots of examples on many websites and in the resources that we provide you, within the links that we provide you, and what's available on Laser Learning as well, to help you see different examples of the observation methods. Another one is a sociogram. A sociogram looks at what kind of social development that child is having within the groups or the different friendship patterns. So it will look at, let's say if you're following a child named Noor, right? So you would say that you would follow all the social interactions that child is having from the moment that she arrives into the nursery. So you'll say that as soon as Noor came, she played for a few minutes with child A, and then that lasted for this long. Then she moved on to child B, and then back to child A, and then back to with the adult or the teacher, and then was alone. And then you would kind of zigzag and follow that child along. So that would be like a sociogram. Again, you can find examples of these. Today I'm just doing a quick review for you. Here's an example of the narrative or the freestyle. Another type of the checklist is a checklist is something that you've probably seen many times as part of your work in your setting. It's most probably that you have these learning outcomes that are predefined, right? And then you simply put a tick against what type of standard or learning outcome that they've achieved in that. And it could be, something that you're using and that may look like a report card, and what may look like, it could be like a tick thing that you do, that you follow in a particular snapshot or particular moment that you're looking at a child. Then a child tracker or movement record. This technique can be used to observe an individual child or a group of children to see how they move around within the setting. So you may want to say, let's imagine you have a classroom with 7 learning areas. So you want to see from the moment that child or this small group enters, where do they go, how do they move around within your learning centers during the day? Do they go to them, and you can do this maybe more easily during free play time when they have access and they can go all over the movement, all over the learning centers. So do they go over to the library section first, or the reading corner, or then do they leave that very quickly and they spend more time in the block area, or do they then, and then you can kind of record make a little tracker to see how long they've spent during the period of time that you're observing them in the learning center. This helps you plan activities so that you know, where are my children most engaged? Which learning centers or which areas in my environment are the most popular? What do my kids like mostly, and how much time do they spend? If they're not spending enough time in the book corner, maybe there's something that we need to do over in that book corner, right? This helps you also make sure that the children are participating in all different kinds of activities. Here's an example of the checklist. This is taken, you might also take a look at the Development Matters document. We tell students all the time to really, that would helps especially if you're doing EYFS, that helps you to understand what's the expected or the normal development rates and the sequences for development for children. And those items in the Development Matters could be used as a checklist as well. Here's a different example of a report card that the nursery has developed that we provide as well. Also, it's very important that you work with parents. We, as early childhood professionals who are working in nursery setting or preschool setting, you're only going to see part of the picture. Parents also spend a large amount of time with their children, right? And sometimes children behave differently in different environments, so that you'll know children may be doing something at home and they don't do it in the school, or vice versa, So it's also good to discuss with parents to see if they've observed different things in different environments. Also, it's important to involve the parents, because indirectly, you are not only getting a better understanding of how that child is developing, but you are also training those parents indirectly to learn, to see how these children are learning through play, and how much they are learning through a simple, painting or gluing activity. So that conversation is really so many benefits of having those kind of conversations. And you can, when you are assessing children, and if you have specific learning standards or aims that you are assessing children on, or you're observing children around, then asking parents to give their input as well in that specific area is also very, very helpful. So, when you're recording, you'll notice that within the cache homework and within the slides, it always says observe in line with the current framework. So what that means is in line with the EYFS framework, right? So you need to know some introductory information before you observe the child. Where is the observation taking place, the date and the time, the number of children being observed. Is it one child? Is it a group of children? How old are they? What kind of techniques are you going to be using? And always you remember that you need the signature of the supervisor, especially for the official longitudinal study observations that we're going to talk about in the next video. You need to make sure that you're using the right templates, that you have the permission of the supervisor to observe that child, and so forth. And then most importantly, your observations has to have an aim, right? You have to have a reason for carrying out that observation. What's the area of development? What's the specific area or specific skill within that area of development? So if let's say you're observing physical development, right? So that's your area. But specifically, if I ask you, no, be more specific, then you'll say, oh, okay, then I'm observing fine motor development. Then I will tell you, no, but be more specific. And then you'll say, I want to observe if this child has control of their fingers and is able to hold a pencil, right? Maybe they're 3 years old and you want to see how well they're holding the pencil, how much control they have of their fine motor skills. So that's being very specific. You have to have an aim for that development. Look at what's the next steps going to be. So when you write down, or when you actually conduct your observation using one of the methods that we discussed, you have to say, okay, so what did I really learn from this, right? You have to reflect on the observation and then say, okay, so what's next? So based on what I've seen from my observation that I did for this child or these groups of children, what's next, right? So that's why, in order to help you reflect, before you observe, you have to know a list of questions or that guide the reason for your observation. So is it the skills and abilities of the child? Is it you're trying to figure out the specific child's needs? Is it something that the child is finding challenging, so you really want to observe it more? Do you want to find out how the child learns best because you feel that that child is really not engaged in some activity that you're doing? Do you want to find out, is it a new child? Do you want to find out a child's interests? So what is your questions that are guiding your observations? And again, in the blue you'll see it. Please, please, please look at the development matters. You really, really should know it by heart. And then if you're just starting out, or if you're an experienced practitioner as well, you need to get used to working and talking with others, whether it's the parents or other carers as well. And then, all children, remember that all children have different needs. So you may not be, they may have different interests, and that can also be a factor in making you to decide on what kind of observations to do, and then how you're going to reflect on that, the results of that observation to help you plan better, right? So remember that you need to reflect on those observations to help you to plan on the next step. And this will take us to our next video and the next unit, 3.15, where we will talk and give you a brief overview about the longitudinal study and how you use observations to help you plan for next steps, and help you to plan plan for that specific child. So let's take a look at the next video where we'll discuss that together. Thank you.